Hello everyone, welcome to Lukman IS. So today on 3rd of March, we are going to analyze the Hindu newspaper, okay? We are going to understand the different issues that were in the Hindu newspaper today. So let us go into the topics that we are going to learn, okay? So today we are going to learn these articles, okay? So these are some of the important articles that were there in the newspaper today. So the first topic that we are going to cover is Himalayan Siro is spotted in Assam, okay? So what is Himalayan Siro? Himalayan Siro is basically a species, okay? It is a species that that was seen in Assam. We are going to talk in detail about this particular species, and we are going to learn about the IUCN status of this particular species, okay? So how it is relevant with your UPSC examination? It is important for the UPSC prelims examination of GS paper 1 under general science topic, and under that we read environment and ecology, okay? So it is a part of environment and ecology. So we are going to understand this particular topic as the first topic for the day, and after that we are going to learn the second topic, which is path to peace in Ethiopia, okay? Path to peace in Ethiopia. We are going to understand this particular topic in detail, and this topic can be related with the mains examination, okay? And under mains examination we will study this topic as part of GS paper 2 and GS paper 3. Under GS paper 2 it affects the international relations, and under GS paper 3 it is related with security related issues, okay? Then we are going to look into the third topic for the day, which is recalibrating relations with European Union, okay? We are going to learn about it. So how it is relevant with the syllabus? It is associated with GS mains paper 2 and paper 3. Under GS mains paper 2, it is associated with India's foreign relations, okay? India's foreign relations, like how we are maintaining our relations with the European Union, okay? And with GS paper 3, it is part of the external sector of Indian economy, okay? It simply means like how we are conducting our trade with other trade partners, okay, of India. So now let us quickly move to understand these topics in detail, okay? So this is the first topic that we are going to understand in depth, okay? So this topic is Himalayan Siro is spotted in Assam, okay? So as you can see over here, okay, so this is the species that we are talking about, okay? So it looks like an antelope as well as like it is similar to a goat, okay? So this is Himalayan Siro. So it has recently been spotted in Assam. Spotted means it has been seen in Assam. So where in Assam was it seen? Okay, so it was seen in the Manas National Park or Manas Tiger Reserve, okay? It was seen in Manas Tiger Reserve. So Manas Tiger Reserve is one of the conservation area in Assam. So it was seen here, okay? It was seen here. This is the map of Assam. You can see this is the map of Assam, and this is the location of Manas National Park and Manas Tiger Reserve. So this particular species was seen recently here. Why it is important? Because this particular species has been seen after a long time, okay, over here. So now let us talk about like what is the conservation status of this particular species. When we talk about the IUCN Red List, IUCN stands for International Union for Conservation of Nature. It maintains a red list of species that are threatened globally, okay? So in that red list there are 7 different categories, okay? So one of the category is vulnerable. So this particular species is listed under vulnerable category in the IUCN Red List. And apart from this, when we talk about sites, okay, under sites it is listed in Appendix 1. And under the Wildlife Protection Act, okay, Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, this is a conservation act of India, okay? Under it is listed in Schedule 1. This particular species is listed in Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act. So what is important for us from UPSC perspective from this topic? We should understand where it was spotted. It was spotted in Manas National Park. Where is Manas National Park or Manas Tiger Reserve located? It is located in the state of Assam in India. And what is the conservation status of Himalayan Siro? Okay, the conservation status is vulnerable under IUCN Red List. It is, under Appendix 1 in CITES and under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Okay, this is a very important information, and if a particular species being spotted in a particular region, it simply highlights that this particular region on Manas Tiger Reserve, okay, is ecologically very good in nature. Means like it is like, you know, different species are coming over here. That's the thing. Now let us move to the you know, a similar topic that was there in the same article. Okay, in the same article they have mentioned about another species. Okay, they have mentioned about another species. What is that species that they have mentioned? They have mentioned about this particular Mandarin duck. Okay, so this is a duck, you can see over here. This is a duck, this is Mandarin duck. You can see how beautiful it is. Okay, so Mandarin duck was also spotted in this in Assam. Okay, where it was spotted in Assam? Basically it was spotted in Dibru-Saikhowa National Park. Okay, this Mandarin duck was spotted in Dibru-Saikhowa National Park in Assam. Okay, so as we have seen in the earlier, you know, like a slide, that like that particular species, okay, that particular Himalayan serow was spotted at Manas Tiger Reserve, but this Mandarin duck was spotted at Dibru-Saikhowa National Park. It is a very important information. So you should remember that Dibru-Saikhowa National Park is located in the state of Assam. Along with this, you can also locate some other, you know, conservation areas. Okay, other conservation areas like Orang National Park. Then we have Kaziranga National Park. All these national parks are located in the state of Assam. Okay, so what is the conservation status of Mandarin duck? The conservation status of Mandarin duck under IUCN Red List is least concerned. Okay, so under IUCN Red List, it is categorized under least concerned category. So this is also a very important information. Now, having understood the first topic, let us quickly move to the next topic for the day. This topic talks about the path to, okay, peace in Ethiopia. Okay, path to peace in Ethiopia means, like, when we read this particular article, we come across the name of a country, Ethiopia. So, you know, quickly a question should arise in our mind, that where is Ethiopia located? Okay, so Ethiopia is located in Africa. It is a country in Africa. You can see this is the location of Ethiopia. Okay, you can see this is the location of Ethiopia. Okay, so this is the location of Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is located in the Horn of Africa, nearby the Horn of Africa. You can see it is in the eastern portion of Africa. Okay, and nearby important locations to Ethiopia are Red Sea. Ethiopia does not directly touch the Red Sea. Okay, but nearby locations are Red Sea. You can see Mediterranean Sea. You can locate, you know, these physical like geographical points. Okay, like Lake Victoria and all. Okay, whenever you come across any international countries or region in news. Okay, so Ethiopia is a African country. Okay, so the thing is, they are talking about the path to peace in Ethiopia. It simply means they are talking about bringing peace in Ethiopia. What it highlights? It simply highlights that, like, there must be some kind of disturbance or internal conflict that is going on in Ethiopia. Okay, so what are the, you know, conflicting things? We are going to discuss about it in this article. Okay, so it says that post-conflict reconstruction work must go beyond meeting short-term security and humanitarian needs. For example, if a particular country is under some kind of internal threat, okay, if there is any internal threat in a particular country, what happens? The peace is disturbed. If the peace is disturbed in a country, what we should do? We should try to bring peace in that particular region. So to bring peace in that particular region, we should take short-term measures, medium-term measures, as well as long-term measures. Okay, so they are talking about that, you know, post-conflict reconstruction work must go beyond meeting the short-term security and humanitarian needs. Means, like, short-term needs are security needs and humanitarian needs. Humanitarian means those people who are affected by conflict in a particular region. Okay, so they need some kind of humanitarian, you know, support. Okay, like in a conflict region, in a war zone, people need some kind of support. So they are talking about this particular thing in this article. Now let us understand in detail about this particular article. Okay, So we are talking about the path to peace in Ethiopia. Okay, path to peace in Ethiopia. Now let us understand. Okay, so what are the conflicting parties? Means like if a conflict is happening in a particular country, there must be different rival groups, okay, that are conflicting with one another, okay, that are competing with one another. So what are those parties that are conflicting with one another? One of the party is the federal government, okay, federal government that is in power in Ethiopia versus Tigray People's Liberation Front, okay. So the conflict is happening. Now the conflict is happening between the federal government, the established government in Ethiopia, and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. So it is a kind of group of people like who are located in the Tigray region. So Tigray is a name of a location in Ethiopia itself. We are not going in depth about it. So you just need to understand that Tigray is a name of location in Ethiopia. Okay. So this is the first conflicting group, the government, federal government versus the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Second thing is these regional groups are also conflicting with one another. They are rivals of one another. They are Oromo, Amhara and Tigrayan groups. Okay, there are different groups. One of the group is known as Oromo, and Amhara and Tigrayan groups. They are also conflicting with one another. Okay. So these are the conflicting parties. Okay. So what the conflict is all about? Why people are conflicting? People are conflicting to come or to gain power, okay, to come to power or gain power. That's the main point, okay. So that is the conflicting point. So what can be the implications of these conflicts? Okay, when we talk about conflicts, so these conflicts has implications not only for Ethiopian but also the entire Horn of Africa region, okay. So these has conflict not only for the people who are located in Ethiopia but also to those countries or the people who are located nearby Ethiopia. So I have already discussed the Horn of Africa. So now before we discuss further about this particular article, let us understand what do we mean by Horn of Africa. Okay, I have already discussed that the eastern portion of Africa, okay, eastern portion of Africa looks like this. Okay, eastern portion of Africa looks like this. Okay, it looks like this. The eastern portion of Africa looks like this. So in the Horn of Africa, how many countries are there? Okay, I am just going to mark these countries now. Okay, how many countries are there in the Horn of Africa? So when we are talking about Horn of Africa, there are 4 important countries that are part of Horn of Africa. One is known as Djibouti. Okay, one of the countries is Djibouti. The second country is Eritrea. Okay, second country is Eritrea. Okay, then the third country that is part of Horn of Africa is Ethiopia. Okay, and the fourth country that is part of Horn of Africa is Somalia. So these are 4 countries that are part of Horn of Africa. So if any internal disturbance is happening in Ethiopia, okay, which is a part of the Horn of Africa, then other countries are also affected. Okay, so like these internal conflicts has implications to its neighbors also. Okay, so the thing is, these conflicts, okay, it has already plagued by low level conflicts, uneven economic development, border disputes, continued food insecurity, climate change, a precarious political situation and a dire refugee crisis. Okay, so these are the different crises that is happening in Ethiopia, okay, because of the internal disturbance. Okay, because of internal disturbance, that's the thing. Okay, so having understood this, having understood the conflicting parties and the issue on which these parties are rivals of one another, now let us understand what are the resolution measures that are being undertaken by the government of Ethiopia. What are the resolution measures, how they are trying to resolve the conflict. Okay, so the resolution measure is a complex process. It is a complex process of developing post-conflict reconstruction framework, okay, and it requires a comprehensive analysis, okay, and this particular analysis should compel immediate coordination between the federal government means the government which is in power, okay, the regional and the local governments, independent and partial adjudicators, civil society, and victims and the community groups. It simply means that like if they want to resolve the internal conflicts in Ethiopia, they have to bring together all these stakeholders and they have to negotiate with those people so that conflict can be resolved in this particular region, okay. Then the various levels of government need to be responsible for two roles, okay. So there are various levels of government also at that there. So we have a federal government that is taking care of the entire Ethiopia. We have state level government, we have local level governments also. So they are responsible for two roles, okay. What are those two roles? One of the roles is, the first role is the generation of effective regional security architecture for uncomplicated jurisdictions. And the second thing, okay, so the first thing is they should generate effective regional security architecture so that like they can prevent any kind of conflict in that particular region. Apart from this, they should have a narrowed scope and mandate for the Reconciliation Commission and its independent committee of facilitators, okay. So the thing is, they should walk towards the mandate and the scope of Reconciliation Commission, and the independent committee of facilitators should be allowed to work over there, okay. And independent mediators and adjudicators can further assist in framing post-conflict models, okay. So these are the things that can be done to bring peace in that particular region, okay. They can bring peace in Ethiopia by bringing the stakeholders together, by negotiating the terms of peace, okay, in that particular region. And they should also take care of the confidence building measures, okay. They should take care of confidence building measures, okay. Having understood this, what are the recovery measures that they are taking? We need to understand about the recovery measures also. What are the recovery measures, okay. So currently what Ethiopia is doing, Ethiopia is attempting to tackle its domestic emergency. Ethiopia is trying to attempt, okay, it is trying to tackle the domestic emergency that has arisen, and it is not a new problem, okay. There was a conflict in the year of 2010, there was another conflict in the year of 2018, and now recently, okay, there was another conflict, and in all more than 52,000 people have died, okay. More than 52,000 people have died in Ethiopia only because of internal conflicts, okay. And many people have left their own region just to save their life, okay. That's the thing. And apart from this, what other measures are being taken, okay. This phase includes securing a military conflict free environment, okay. So what they are trying to do, they are trying to build a kind of environment that is military conflict free, okay, and addressing increasing displacements, allowing access to basic needs assistance for citizens at risk of famine, okay, and strengthening humanitarian capacity in conflict ridden areas, okay. So these are the activities that are being undertaken presently, and medium term and long term recovery measures must be taken as a trust building measure, okay. Means like we have already discussed that like they are taking short term measures where they are ensuring security of people, and they are providing humanitarian needs. Means like people who are affected by a conflict, they are being provided hospital care, they are being provided food and all. So that is a short term measure, but apart from this, they should also take, okay, medium term and long term recovery measures, and they should build confidence among the various stakeholders so that a long and sustaining peace can be maintained in Ethiopia, okay. So this is the thing. If you want to learn more about it, you can visit the Hindu page, and you can read from there as well. Now, having discussed the second topic, now let us move to the next topic for the day, okay. What is the next topic that we are going to talk? The next topic is recalibrating relations with European Union. Okay, so the thing is here the headline, the heading itself gives you a lot of information. So they are building some kind of, you know, they are recalibrating relations with European Union. Okay, who are the parties who are building the relations? On one hand we have India. Okay, on one hand we have India. Okay, on one hand we have India, and on the other hand we have European Union. Okay, we are recalibrating. Okay, we are recalibrating the relations between India and European Union. This is one thing. Okay, so what kind of relations are we recalibrating? We are recalibrating the economic relations. What kind of relations? Economic relations. Okay, economic relations. Okay, so this is a topic which is related to General Studies paper 3. Okay, GS paper 3. It is very important. Okay, so we are recalibrating relations between India and European Union, and European Union presently comprises of 27 member countries. Okay, so when we talk about European Union, okay, when we talk about European Union, so it has presently 27 member countries. Okay, earlier there were 28 members. Okay, earlier there were 28 members, and from there the Britain has exited, that is known as Brexit. After Brexit there are 27 member countries in European Union. So what is important about European Union? European Union is a political, okay, it is a political and economic union. It is a political and economic union. Okay, it is a political and economic union. That is, this is an important point, that European Union is a political and economic union that comprises of 27 member countries. Okay, and what it does, okay, what it does, like it has created a single market structure. It has created a single, okay, single market structure where people, goods, and where people and goods can freely move from one country to another country, okay, without any kind of visa and all. That's the thing. So having understood the European Union and India, and we are going to understand about economic relations between these two countries. It is very important. Okay, so now let us look in detail about what this article talks. Okay, so this article says that forging stronger ties with the region could help India strengthen manufacturing and revitalize exports. Okay, so it says, like, if we strengthen the economic ties with the European Union, what we can do? We can strengthen the relations. Okay, we can strengthen our own economy. Okay, by strengthening our relation with the European Union. Okay, so this particular article focuses primarily on India's export potential. Okay, so like for India, European Union is a market. For India, European Union is a market. There we export a lot of goods, lot of items to the European Union. Okay, so the thing is, after Brexit there are only 27 member countries in European Union. So after Brexit, the European Union is also trying to recalibrate its relations with other countries, and this is high time for India that it should also look forward to build greater ties with the European Union. Okay, this is very important. So the thing is, as you know, that Atmanirbhar Bharat package, okay, the Atmanirbhar Bharat program and the budget 2021-22 have set the tone for the tenor to bolster supply chain and achieve self-reliance. Okay, so the thing is, if we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat program, under this we are trying to be self-reliant in our manufacturing capabilities. And so the budget 2021 and 22 was in tune with the Atmanirbhar Bharat program of the government of India. Okay, so the thing is, when we talk about vision of self-reliant India means Atmanirbhar Bharat program. So when we are talking about the vision of self-reliant India, what we are trying to do? we are trying to localize the value added along the supply chains. Okay, we are trying to localize the value added, like whatever goods we are manufacturing. Okay, so we are trying to add values at every stage of production. Okay, after production also we are trying to add value. So if we add value, what happens? The overall value of the commodity that is being produced in India increases. Okay, so that like when we export it, we get higher higher revenue out of it. So if we are exporting the goods, okay, we talk about the export potential of India, means like how much good we are producing, okay, that can be exported to other countries. It is very important to know. Okay, so the thing is, like, what are the goods that we are exporting to European Unions? These goods comprises of apparel, gems and jewelry, chemicals, machinery, automobile, pharmaceuticals, etc. Okay, so these are the goods that have export potential for India. We are exporting these goods to the European Union. Okay, then India benefits under the European Union's generalized system of preferences. Okay, so what do we mean by generalized system of preferences? The generalized system of preferences simply means that European Union, okay, gives some kind of preferential treatment to the countries that are exporting goods to the European Union. Okay, so it has given some kind of preferential treatment in trade measures, okay, to India. Not only to India, it provides similar things to other countries also. So under generalized systems of preferences, let's consider on one hand we have European Union, on the other hand we have India. If India is exporting some goods, okay, if India is exporting some goods, okay, what European Union can do? It can apply some kind of tariff. Okay, it can apply some kind of tariff. Okay, what do we mean by tariff? Tariff simply means a kind of tax. Okay, tariff means a kind of tax that a country imposes on importing and exporting goods. Okay, so the thing is, European Union can apply some kind of taxes to the goods that are being exported from India. Okay, so the thing is, under this generalized system of preferences, European Union gives some preferential treatment and it reduces the tariff to the goods that are being imported in European Union. So the thing is, but most of the goods that we are exporting to the European Union, they were under the generalized system of preferences. But like some of these goods are graduating, okay, some of these goods are graduating under the GSP. What do we mean by graduating? What do we mean by graduating? It simply means a kind of policy, okay, a kind of policy that the European Union has set for the goods that it is importing from different countries. Okay, so under this particular clause, okay, so when does product graduation applies? Under this particular clause, okay, product graduation applies when average import of a product from a beneficiary country exceeds 17.5% of the European Union's GSP imports of the same product from all beneficiary countries over 3 years. Okay, let me explain you in simple words. What do we mean by this? Okay, let me explain. Okay, just give me a minute. Okay, so what do we mean by graduating? Let's consider on one hand we have European Union. Okay, this is European Union. On other hand we have India. Okay, on other hand we have India. We are exporting a lot of goods from India to European Union. Okay, we are exporting a lot of goods from India to European Union. Okay, but at the same time there may be other countries also, okay, there may be other countries also that are exporting their goods, okay, that are exporting their goods to the European Union. Okay, let us talk about a particular kind of good. Okay, let us talk about a particular kind of good. Let's consider A. If that particular good, okay, that particular thing is being, okay, exported from India, from this particular country, okay, this particular country or this particular country, okay, so this A good This is a kind of article or good that is being exported from India, exported from country C1, exported from country C2, exported from country C3. If more than 17.5% of this particular good comes from one particular country over a period of 3 years, means like they take a time frame of 3 years, under that 3 years duration, if one particular good is being exported by a particular country, okay, that exceeds this particular threshold 17.5%, so that particular good will be removed from the this generalized system of preferences. Means it simply means like that particular good has graduated. Now this particular good will no longer get the benefit of the generalized system of preferences. That's the thing. Okay, so most of the goods that are being exported from India to European Union have already graduated, okay, and many of these goods are in the process of getting graduated. Okay, so it is very important for India that it should have negotiation with the European Union. It should recalibrate its trade ties with European Union, so that we can have a favorable trade policy with the European Union in the coming future. Okay, that's the thing. Okay, so what are those goods that have already graduated, like like under the generalized system of preferences? We are specifically talking about those goods that are being exported from India. Okay, so these goods are textiles, inorganic and organic chemicals, gems and jewelry, iron, steel and their articles. Okay, so these are some of the goods that have already graduated. It simply means these goods no longer come under under the benefit. Okay, India is not able to get the benefit in exporting these goods under the generalized system of preferences. That's the thing. Okay, so what should India do? India should simply speak to the European Union. It should renegotiate or recalibrate the trade trade terms with the European Union, so that like India can again start getting more benefit out of the exports that it is making to the European Union. Okay, so now let us talk about some other relevant things. Okay, so India's trade competitors. Okay, so which are those countries that are trade competitors for India? Means like on one hand India is exporting some of the goods to the European Union, other countries are also exporting their goods to the European Union. So it is natural that there may be some countries that are competitors to India in exporting their goods to the European Union. One of the competitor is Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is specifically very good at exporting the apparel exports. Okay, in terms of apparel, or like in terms of clothings and all. So Bangladesh is very competitive in that particular case. Okay, and apart from this, when we talk about Vietnam, okay, Vietnam is also a competitor for India. Why? Because recently Vietnam has concluded a free trade agreement with the European Union in the year of 2019. Okay, Vietnam has concluded a free trade agreement in 2019 with the European Union. Okay, so the thing is, Vietnam is at an advantageous position as compared to India. Okay, so now if we talk about China, China has also signed a comprehensive agreement on investment with the European Union. Okay, so these three countries are particularly very competitive. Okay, they are competitors to India when it comes to exporting its goods to the European Union. Now let us understand what do we mean by this free trade agreement. Okay, what is free trade agreement? Okay, so free trade agreement is a pact. Okay, it is a kind of pact, it is a kind of agreement, okay, between two or more nations. Okay, it is a kind of agreement between two or more nations, okay, to reduce barriers to imports and exports among them. Okay, to reduce the barriers in imports and exports among them. What kind of barriers are we talking about? Okay, let's consider there is a country A and there is a country B. if country A wants to export some goods to country B, the country B will import some kind, apply some kind of tariff. Okay, it will apply some kind of tariff. Tariff means it will apply tax, okay, to the goods that are being imported in country B from country A. If it applies, very heavy tax, what will happen? The goods that are coming from country A will not be competitive in the market of country B. Okay, similarly, if there is another country which is C and it is also exporting the similar goods to country B, okay, then if country B applies some lesser tariff to this, to the goods that are being imported from country C, what will happen? The goods that are being manufactured in country C or that are being produced in country C, they will be more competitive in the market of B, okay, so they will get an advantage as compared to country A. So the thing is, this is the thing, okay. So under this particular free trade agreement, different countries, come to an agreement, sign a pact under which, they mutually decide that I am going to reduce the tariff on the goods that you are importing or exporting from our country. That's the thing, okay. This is the free trade agreement. Now, under a free trade policy, goods and services can be bought and sold across international borders with little or no government tariffs, quotas, subsidies, or prohibitions to inhibit their exchange. It simply means whenever this free trade policy is being signed between two countries, the goods between these two countries will be able to move more freely as compared to when tariffs are very high, okay. So Vietnam has already concluded our free trade agreement pact with the European Union. That's the thing. Now we will understand about one more thing, okay. This is just an economic term. I will explain this particular term to you. It is like non-tariff measures, okay. So tariff measures are direct tax, okay, tax that is being applied by a particular country, okay, in export and import of goods from other countries. That's the thing, from or to other countries. Now what are non-tariff measures? These are also trade policies under which a particular country may restrict, okay, the import of certain goods to its jurisdictions, okay, and they generally use certain kind of clauses like health related issues, like for example, let's consider India may be exporting some kind of goods to, let's consider, European Union. If it happens that European Union considers that particular good is not healthy for the people of European Union, what it will do? It will impose non-tariff measures, okay, non-tariff measures. So once non-tariff measures are imposed on the goods that are being imported to European Union from India, so these goods will not be able to come to the market of the European Union to the extent that the non-tariff measures are applied, okay. This is the thing. So what is non-tariff measures? The non-tariff measures are policy measures, okay, other than tariffs, that can potentially have an economic effect on the international trade in goods. They are increasingly shaping trade, influencing who trades and what and how much. It simply means these non-tariff measures are shaping the trade policies of different countries now, and it puts a limitation on who is doing trade, on what items, and to what extent they are doing the trades, okay. That's the thing. So for exporters, importers, and policy makers, non-tariff measures represent a major challenge, okay. So like, though many non-tariff measures aim primarily at protecting public health or environment, they also substantially affect trade through information compliance and procedural cost, okay. So these are non-tariff measures. So the thing is, what approaches should India take, okay, with reference to the free trade agreements? Should India also sign some kind of like recalibrated free trade agreement with the European Union? So the thing is, yes, like it should recalibrate its trade ties with the European Union. To what extent? Okay, so we need to understand this particular thing. So India's negotiation for a broad-based trade and investment agreement, it is a very important, keyword. Okay, so India needs a broad-based trade and investment agreement, okay, which commenced, like it is started in the year of 2007, and it is yet to materialize due to the lack of concurrence in areas like automotives, dairy and marine products. Okay, so the thing is, India and European Union are already in the process of discussion or negotiation with reference to broad-based trade and investment agreement. It has started in the year of 2007, but yet they were not able to conclude this particular agreement. Means like they were not able to come to an agreement under this particular broad-based trade and investment agreement. That's the thing. Further, there should be also provisions for aspects such as investments and non-tariff measures. So like this article is saying that under this particular broad-based trade and investment agreement, these clauses should also be taken care, like investment and non-tariff measures. Okay, investment and non-tariff measures must also be included in this particular agreement, so that like India is at par with the European Union. Okay, so India is at par with the European Union. That's the thing. So now let us discuss about the way forward. Okay, so what is the way forward for India? What should India do? Okay, so India also needs to negotiate on investment related aspects with the European Union to enhance bilateral investment. Okay, so like India should like negotiate means discuss with the European Union. Why India should discuss? It should discuss, okay, to enhance the bilateral investment and foster a stronger value chains, especially in technology intensive sectors in which the European Union has a comparative advantage. Okay, so European Union has a comparative advantage when it comes to, okay, technology driven sectors. So India should recalibrate, India should negotiate with European Union, okay, because in technology driven sectors European Union has an added advantage. Okay, these free trade agreements have some institutional arrangements for non-tariff measures. Okay, so these free trade agreements have some institutional arrangement for non-tariff measures. So India should critically review, okay, the availability of such arrangements in its negotiations, as also their operationalization and effectiveness. Okay, so if there are some clauses of non-tariff measures in these free trade agreements, okay, then India should also discuss those non-tariff measures with the European Union, so that the benefit of non-tariff not having non-tariff measure can be reaped by India. Okay, so India should try to reduce the non-tariff measures to the maximum extent possible. So post Brexit, so I have already discussed that Britain has taken itself away from the European Union. So now effectively there are 27 member countries in the European Union. So post Brexit, European Union finds itself in the midst of growing need for recalibrating ties with the partner countries. Okay, so the thing is, European Union in itself is in need of recalibration of ties with its partner countries. So India should take this opportunity, it should utilize this opportunity and forge stronger ties with the European Unions in such a manner so that there should be mutual benefit for India and the European Union. Okay, so with this we have discussed important articles from The Hindu. Okay, if you want to learn more, you can visit the Hindu website and read from there. That's all from my side. Thank you so much for attending this session. I hope it was a very informative session for you, and you have a good day ahead.